A dive kick is an aerial attack that accelerates quickly towards the ground, foot first. Dive kicks are potent offensive weapons because they change how you move through the air, and often characters can choose multiple angles for the dive kick's approach, making it super annoying to anti-air them. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because there's actually a Sega Genesis exclusive fighter that was based around this idea. Fighting Masters was released in late 1991 in Japan and early 1992 in America. This was about a year after Street Fighter II's arcade release, so it's no surprise that this game decided to try something different. Does it work? Is Fighting Masters a good fighting game? Well, I'm not sure how to answer this one. The main reason is because there are many different opinions on this game. I've seen people love it, hate it, feel indifferent, and I've even seen this considered one of the worst fighting games on the console. I mean, yeah, the game does have some bad points, but is it really that bad? Well, before we answer that question, how about we take a closer look? In this video, I'll be going over the game in its entirety. That includes the mechanics, characters, and of course, the game as a whole. Now mind you, I have finished this game with every character, had some serious matches against one of my friends, and I made a guide on it a few years ago. So I think I'm more than qualified to explain this game from front to back. Without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with the presentation, I think it's a mixed bag for the case of Fighting Masters. Not necessarily because of the quality, but rather the quantity. For example, the stages in Fighting Masters look decent, but there's only 4 of them. There's an impressive roster of 12 characters, but the sprites are rather small and they don't have many frames of animation. The attacks and moves feel very satisfying, but it feels like everyone has the same moves. The music? Oh man, the music. It is pretty dang good. The final round theme alone is easily one of the best tracks in this game. But due to the lack of stages, there are only 4 battle tracks in the game. This guarantees that you hear the same track at least 2 or more times when playing through the main mode. This is on top of the fact that there aren't many sound effects and there are no voice samples whatsoever. Now, I can't give the game too much flack. After all, this is one of the more earlier Sega Genesis titles and it's not like Street Fighter II had a home port yet. So for an early fighting game, Fighting Masters' presentation is decent. As for the story, you would get a neat introduction upon starting the main mode, along with that banger of a soundtrack that I mentioned earlier. In the distant future, the galaxy was dominated by 12 star systems, each with their own master, but a dark lord named Valgasu has enslaved all but one of the masters. Now it's up to the last fighting masters to challenge Valgasu and bring balance to the Wait, this is the plot to the Japanese version. I mean, it works well enough, but what do we get in the States? A giant red sun will go nova within hours. 12 star systems inhabited by sentient beings will be destroyed. An omnipotent race known only as the Primaries declared their power to save one civilization from extinction. To win the right to survive, each race must choose a champion strong enough to compete in the tournament to the death. Holy shit, that sounds way better. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind the character I'm playing being the hero of the story, but the idea that you're fighting so your race is saved from a nova? I can't think of many games with that kind of plotline. Well, the plot has definitely caught my interest, but I think we should learn about the gameplay before we see where this goes. Fighting Masters is a 2-button fighter that looks very simple at first. There aren't many attacks to perform and it looks like all of the characters perform very similar moves. I think it's due to these reasons that some consider this game awful. First impressions do matter and I'm pretty sure plenty assume that the gameplay has nothing interesting going on. I mean, you take one look at the gameplay and you'd think that's the mundane equivalent of how kids would play with action figures. The overdramatic throws, the constant bouncing between the walls and the floor, that kind of stuff. But when you take the time to learn the gameplay and its mechanics, you might learn that Fighting Masters not only has more than meets the eye, but the developers might have been ahead of their time. But first things first, let's go over the basics. In Fighting Masters, matches are decided by 1 round in the main mode, and a best of 3 in the versus mode. There's also a watch mode where you can watch 2 CPUs fight each other. As for the controls, B is used to attack, and C will jump. You can move left and right and you can duck by holding down. If you played a lot of the more modern fighters, they will feel a bit awkward for jump to be on the button. It shouldn't take you too long to get used to considering the only other button is used to attack. As for movement, this will definitely take some time to get used to. More specifically, how jumping works. You can jump straight up, forward, and backward, but there's a lot more to it than that. The first aspect you must get accustomed to is jumping into a wall. Doing so will automatically bounce you to the other direction. It can be very easy to forget this while cornered, and it will throw you off if you aren't expecting it. But that's not all. Not only can you jump in 3 directions, but you can perform short hops by tapping the jump button, and you can do a slight jump forward or backward by letting go of the direction immediately after pressing jump. Do you have to make use of all of this to play well? No. Is it awesome that they included these options for such an early fighting game? Absolutely. While I don't agree with the wall bouncing, it's pretty cool that this game gives you multiple options to control your jump arc. Again, it's not necessary, but considering how tame grounded movement is, I think these are good additions. Now before we get into offense, let's talk about defense. Your offense will come from the only button that's used for attacking, which is the B button. Now why am I talking about offense when I said I was going to go over defense? Well, the truth of the matter is that Fighting Masters is a game where the best offense is the only defense. The reason is because there's no kind of block mechanic. You either dodge your opponent's attacks, or counter them if possible. Now on paper this sounds like a disaster, but the developers must have been very aware of how problematic this could be. For example, when you get up from a knockdown, you'll be invincible to attacks for a very brief moment. This alone prevents easy infinite combos from happening from one knockdown, but it also means that there isn't a definitive way to make your opponent guess on wake up. As such, you're better off creating a bit of distance since the opponent can take advantage of this invincibility to get a free hit in. Okay, seriously, let's get into offense. I did say this is a fighter based around dive kicks, so I shouldn't be delaying this any further. B will perform a basic attack. This can be done while standing, crouching, or while jumping. Some characters can perform different mid-air attacks by pressing B while holding a direction, or by pressing jump instead. More importantly, all characters can perform a dive attack by holding up and pressing B while mid-air. Most will perform a dive kick, but some will dive with a different attack. This is probably the most important move in the game, not only because it's very fast, but also because it can be used for movement. You can combine dive attacks with jumps, short hops, or after jumping behind your opponent. Since characters will automatically turn around when jumping to the other side, a well-timed dive attack can still go in the direction of your opponent. The best part is that these can be performed at any time while mid-air. You can do it as soon as you jump, or even when you're about to land. Considering dive attacks are great for movement, offense, and in a game without blocking, you'd probably think that dive attacks are ridiculously broken, right? Well, you'd be wrong. While these attacks are incredibly useful in multiple ways, plenty of characters can counter them with a standing attack, a crouching attack, and in a unique way that we'll go over in a bit. Still, it is possible to bait the opponent into attack in the air, then immediately closing in with a dive attack. I can't stress enough how important dive attacks are. Its usefulness will vary from character to character, but it's quite amazing that the devs decided to make this a universal mechanic, in 1991 of all times. With basic attacks explained, let's talk about throws. You might have already realized that strikes barely do any damage to the opponent. The reason is because the bulk of your damage will come from throws, with strikes being a catalyst in a sense. When both players make contact on the ground, they'll grab each other. During this moment, you will have to press B or C in order to perform a grab. Some characters will have multiple grabs that will require you to hold a direction as well. Sounds simple, but there are multiple factors to consider when it comes to this grapple state. When the players make contact, they will enter one of 2 different states. These are what I like to call the neutral state and the stun state. The neutral state occurs when both players make contact without being in an attack animation. In this situation, the grab will go to whoever performs the input first. This can be used offensively against an opponent who's knocked down. While they will be invincible to strikes, you can still grab them right when they get up. This is risky since you're giving the opponent a chance to grab you instead. The stun state is the safest and most interesting. When you hit the opponent with a strike, they'll either be knocked back, or they'll enter a stun state. They will be invincible to strikes while stunned, but not to grabs. By grabbing them while they're stunned, they won't be able to perform a grab until a second later. This guarantees that you are able to perform your grab without the risk of the opponent doing theirs. Now the interesting part is that there's another way to grab the opponent in a stun state without actually hitting them. I don't know what geniuses was behind this one, but the game has a mechanic that can punish you for whiffing an attack. If you're grabbed while in an attack animation, or the opponent grabs you right as you're landing from a mid-air attack, you'll automatically be in a stun state in the grapple. This means that it's more than possible to dodge something like a dive kick, then immediately grab the opponent as they land in order to get a guaranteed grab. Am I the only one that finds this fascinating? I mean, you have this game where both characters are constantly getting flinged around like action figures, and yet it promotes landing accurate strikes over attacking wildly? It's clear to me that the devs had some care for balancing, and it hurts even more that many players probably don't know about these aspects. In any case, I gotta stay on topic. As mentioned before, grabs are your main means of dealing damage. The damage will not only depend on the grab, but can also depend on where it was performed. Some grabs will have the character throw the opponent in a direction, which will deal extra damage if the opponent collides with a wall before landing. There are also some grabs that act a bit weird in a corner, which can lead to them dealing more damage than usual. And with all of that explained, you should now have an idea of what Fighting Masters is like. But let's have a quick recap. There's no blocking in Fighting Masters, and neutral involves reacting to your opponent's offense while trying to start your own. If you land a strike that stuns the opponent, that's when you will have to quickly make contact with them to get some good damage in with a grab. Then, you can either back off to go back to neutral, or take a risky approach that can lead to you being on the receiving end. You got all of that? Cool, cause now we gotta talk about the most broken part about this game. Before I go over the potential infinite loop, let's go over some weird aspects. For starters, your character will crouch upon landing from a jump. Even if you performed a mid-air attack, your character will still enter the crouch animation upon landing. This can be a detriment since your standing attack is your main means of anti-airing, something you won't have access to immediately if you just landed on the ground. Thankfully, you can jump out of this crouch animation. Another strange aspect is the camera. Unless both players are moving opposite directions, it's possible to drag your opponent out of the corner by moving backwards. This never bothered me too much, but it is noticeable when practicing alone. Now to talk about the infinite loop. In Fighting Masters, there are a few grab animations that put the opponent in a unique state. Assuming you perform said grab, the opponent's character will get up while crouched for a brief moment. Since they cannot act during this animation, you can time your next strike so that it hits them right when they recover. And should that strike stun them, then you can do the same grab again. I think the reason why this works is because when a character gets up in this way, the invincibility frames wear off by the time they are able to act. However, this is considered a potential infinite loop for a reason. Performing this can either lead to you winning from one interaction, or the opponent will get knocked back from your next strike, thus ending the infinite loop. It's possible to get unlucky enough in that your strikes will keep knocking the opponent away instead of stunning them. To be honest, I think the way strikes work is one of the worst parts of the game. While it does prevent the infinite loops from being guaranteed, the idea of strikes causing a random effect can be rather frustrating to deal with. I might even consider it the worst aspect of Fighting Masters since you're basically flipping a coin for each strike you land. Now of course, not all characters can perform this infinite loop, and I think it's about time we go over them. There are a total of 12 playable characters in Fighting Masters, with the 13th character being the final boss. When playing a versus match, both players cannot pick the same character. The only way to do so is to perform a glitch by pressing up or down right when you select your character. I'll give an overview of each character and my opinion on how good they are. Being that the American manual only has a move list for these characters, their lore was taken from the trading cards that came with the game. I bought these cards years ago and I even went out of my way to scan them at the time. I don't know if anyone else did the same before I have, but if you ever come across these images online, then you can thank me for that. Their names will be based on the American port, but I'll also show their name from the Japanese port. In any case, let's start with our first Fighting Master. Dirk originates from the United States sector of the planet Earth. Born and bred for combat, Dirk is a near Superman, and has knowledge of fighting techniques from wrestling to ninjutsu. Being the first fighter in the roster, it's no surprise that Dirk is an all-around character. He has decent range on his attacks, a good anti-air, and a pretty good dive kick. He is also one of the only characters to have a real combo. By performing his body throw while cornered, it's possible to hit the opponent with a standing strike right before they land, and if he has his opponent in the corner, he can get a ton of damage in by performing a backdrop, which can deal multiple hits depending on the location. Now with everything I've just said, you'd think I'd place him higher on the tier list, but actually, I consider Dirk a B tier character. He can't perform a potential infinite loop, He can only get high damage from the corner, and his combo is almost pointless since strikes do jack off with damage. I think he's too honest when compared to some of the stronger characters. If you're okay with that or you want to swag on your opponent with some combos, then Dirk can be a good choice to start out with. Entitled the greatest of his kind, Mastodon has defended his planet's honor for over 200 years. His mastery of the trunk is unrivaled. I think Mastodon is solid. Not only can he perform a potential infinite loop with his trunk throw, but his standing strike and flying trunk whip have really good range. These moves can allow him to outreach the opponent, which can lead into his potential infinite loop. Unfortunately, he is rather slow in terms of speed. His jump height and movement speed is below average and his dive attack doesn't go very far. You can still play offensively, but it's better to make use of his range and play defensively. Because of this, I consider Mastodon an A tier character. I don't think he's overpowered, just really good overall. Equus, though young and inexperienced, is a natural for combat. His agility enables him to topple the heaviest of competitors. Well, they definitely got the inexperienced part right, cause Equus is the worst character in the game. Similar to Dirk, Equus can get a lot of damage in by using his power slam against a cornered opponent. If he's the one that's cornered, he can instead perform neck crunch, which is more consistent in dealing a lot of damage. However, Equus has two major problems that hold him back. I made it pretty clear that this game is based around dive kicks and spacing. So what happens when you have a character who not only has one of the worst dive attacks, but also has a difficult time hitting opponents out of the air? Well, you get Equus, who sits alone in C tier. He's pretty much a worse version of Dirk, and he will have quite the difficult time winning against the stronger characters. I can't think of anyone in the roster who is just as bad, though of course, it is still possible to win. Morin comes from a race of aggressive warriors. His skill with the Tomfra sticks is dangerously hypnotic. Similar to Mastodon, Morin has really good range on her attacks. The majority of her moveset is really good, and she also has access to two different dive attacks. She can either perform a Tomfra dive attack with up plus B, or a body attack with down plus C. On top of her having a potential infinite loop, Morin is great for those who want a strong character with plenty of aerial options. Her main weakness is the startup of her attacks. Plenty of characters can instantly throw out an attack while hers will have slightly more startup time. Even one of her dive attacks won't come out at all if you aren't high enough in the air. Due to this flaw, I think she can sit in A tier. She can definitely be a tier higher, but her attack speed can cost her the match. The cyborgs of Mecha have constructed a combatant especially for this event. Grinder represents the last sentient automation, and only has one directive: to win with extreme prejudice. Grinder has a very unique dive attack. It's not as fast as some of the others, but it can actually hit from both sides. Because of this, Grinder can hit with a cross-up dive attack without having to change directions. It also has some really fast attacks with good range, and can get decent damage in with its breakdance. Grinder can perform a potential infinite loop, but it works differently than the others. To perform it, you have to perform its breakdance grab, then immediately jump and press C while mid-air to do a jump kick. If timed before the opponent lands on the floor, they'll wake up in a crouched state and you can land a strike before they're able to move. I actually discovered this as I was making the script and recording footage for Grinder, and before then I considered Grinder a B tier character. But now that I know this is possible to do, I think Grinder is easily A tier. A pretty good character overall with a somewhat weird loop that can lead to a ton of damage. Goldrock comes from one of the oldest races in the universe. With a body literally made of stone, he is an intimidating rival. Goldrock is a bit weird compared to the rest of the cast. The most noticeable difference is that he is the only character that cannot crouch at all. This makes it difficult for him to avoid attacks, but he's far from being a bad character. His kick has a good amount of reach and he can perform a pose by pressing down plus B or C while mid-air. It's possible to use this pose as an option to beat out dive attacks, but it's not 100% consistent. Thankfully, Goldrock can perform a potential infinite loop with his B grab. It does throw the opponent far however, so you might have to use his dive attack to close the distance. He also has a unique stumble animation upon being knocked back, which allows him to recover faster than the others. It's not a game changer since the opponent can adapt to the timing, but it is interesting nonetheless. Needless to say, he can be placed in either A tier or B plus tier. The inability to crouch and his low mobility holds him back, but he can still be a threat. Mocked because of their weak feather exterior, these usually docile creatures live among the trees of News Papere Triae. Their only warrior is Phoenix, a cultural legend. It should be no surprise that Phoenix has high mobility. Not only can it move fast and jump high, but Phoenix can also fly by pressing C while midair. It looks cool and all, but it's very situational since it technically counts as an attack. As such, it can put Phoenix in a stunned state if the opponent grabs them upon landing. Outside of that, Phoenix has a good standing strike and 2 different dive attacks, but due to the lack of a potential infinite loop, I consider Phoenix a B+ character. It doesn't have any crazy gimmicks, but it is balanced enough in that it can hold its own without needing the corner. If you're going to use Phoenix, its forward plus C grab would be your best option for damage. Armed with a tough exoskeleton, razor-sharp claws, and intimidating feelers, Zygrunt poses a painful threat to softer opponents. His merciless attacks seem to be driven by some seething vengeance. Zygrunt is easily one of the best characters in the game. A great dive attack along with other good aerials, very high jump height, deceptively long reach on his ground normals, and of course, a potential infinite loop with his C grab. Zygrunt is one of the few characters who doesn't really have any weaknesses. At most, his basic attacks on the ground aren't instant, but that's not a big deal considering how great he is overall. Because of these factors, Zygrunt is an S tier character without question. Mind you, it doesn't mean that he's unstoppable, he's just really good against the entire cast. Soft and gel-like, Rotundo does not appear to be physically apt, but in a match, the contender quickly learns to respect Rotundo's technique and strength. Rotundo is one of the other top tiers. Its good basic attacks and potential infinite loop would be fine enough, but it also has a strong aerial move on down plus B. This will have Rotundo perform a flying guillotine on the way down. Depending on how you jump and position yourself, it can be very difficult for the opponent to counter this move. Like with Zygrunt, I think Rotundo is an S tier character. It can technically be considered A since its dive attack isn't great against grounded opponents, but its spinning attack more than makes up for it. Xenon comes from a long line of fabled dragons. Wait, why is that in quotations? Banished from the earth thousands of years ago. With his whip-like tail, powerful claws, and fiery breath, he is more than a worthy opponent. While Xenon doesn't have an infinite loop, the most obvious advantage that Xenon has is his health. For some reason, he's the only one who has a few more bars of health over everyone else. His grounded normals are unique since they will set the opponent on fire. This trait and the range of these normals allow Xenon to do something very interesting. When Xenon sets the opponent on fire, it will drastically reduce their invincibility to strikes upon recovering from the stun state. With this in mind, you can hit the opponent with a fire attack, then instantly perform a jump attack. You can repeat this until the opponent is eventually stunned from your jump attack, in which you can close in to perform his avalanche grip grab. You might think that Xenon is a strong character based off of what I said, but I think he belongs in B tier. Like Dirk, he's only at his best in the corner. It also doesn't help that his fire attacks have a lot of recovery frames. He's still very good if he can land his moves, but missing his fire attacks can be fatal. Though you wouldn't expect it from a plant, Dio can be a wicked rival, especially when fresh meat is served. Armed with spiked leaves and vampire-sharp teeth, he can literally shred his opponents, and usually does. Ah yes, my favorite time-stopping plant. Except that he actually doesn't stop time. Like Phoenix, Dio is another character with a really balanced moveset. Standing B is a solid anti-air, and jump B can be used as an air-to-air option. His best grab is done with B since it can knock the opponent into the wall for more damage. He doesn't have an infinite loop, so his damage is more on the fair side. Dio's best benefit is his size. Since he goes very low to the ground while crouching, he can dodge many attacks that would have landed otherwise. He can use this to counter with a crouching strike, or he can duck under the opponent's jump attack and possibly grab them in a stun state if they land close enough. This might be due to Dio being my favorite, but I consider him an A tier character. He may not have a potential infinite loop, but his size can make the opponent think twice about their next move. At worst, he can be B+. Uppercut is the Universal Heavyweight Champion, famous for his devastating jabs, slugs, and crushing body blows. He is revered by fighters throughout the galaxy. I think Uppercut is unintentionally a glass cannon. Really good normal attacks on the ground, one of the easiest potential infinite loops in the game, and a decent dive attack. However, Uppercut has a huge weakness that I don't think was intentional. Unlike the other characters, Uppercut does not have invincibility frames upon getting up. Because of this, everyone can perform infinite loops against him. Even the characters that don't have a potential infinite loop can get one started against Uppercut. I'm not really sure where to place him. I consider him B+ since he can still rob a game off of someone, but with how significant his weakness is, I can see him being at a much lower tier. I'm only putting him in B+ since he technically has a better chance than Equus in terms of matchups. You will either win quickly, or you will lose quickly. And that's all of the playable characters that Fighting Masters have to offer. While this tier list may be my opinion first and foremost, it's a bit hard to make one on this game. This is mainly due to strikes leading to random outcomes, which makes the infinite loops completely random. It is possible to win as any character, but there are some obvious gaps between some of them. Alright, so we know how to play the game and we know how the characters work. The only thing left is to see what awaits us in the one-player mode. The first thing we should do is check the options. You can select between one of 3 difficulties and you can set the number of continues. You won't see the credits upon playing through the game on easy mode, so I recommend either normal mode or hard mode. Either way, I don't think the difficulty has a huge effect on the CPU. If anything, easy and hard felt almost the exact same. For now, let's assume you kept the difficulty on normal. Your goal is to face 11 opponents before facing the final boss. There are no mirror matches, fights are best of 1, and you cannot switch characters upon continuing. The order of opponents will depend on the first one you fight, as it will go down the roster in the order shown in the character select. So if your first opponent is Dirk, then your next opponent will be Mastodon. The one-player mode can also be considered a survival mode since you recover health after each fight. It's possible to recover so much health that you will have more than the default amount. As for fighting the CPU, it's not very fun. Granted, I shouldn't be surprised considering fighting game AI is garbage, but the way they break the rules is rather interesting. For one, they break the rules in terms of movement. While they're moving on the ground, they can change their movement speed at a dime. This makes it feel risky to approach them since it can instantly close in at high speed at any time. Another problem is trying to grab them in a neutral state. More often than not, they'll perform their grab instantly with both characters locked. This can be deadly if they're close to you while you're knocked down, as it can grab you again and give you almost no chance to recover. Due to the randomness of how strikes work and the randomness of the CPU, I recommend using a character with long reach and normal attacks and a consistent anti-air. To deal with their random movement speed, you can either draw attacks at a distance, or slowly inch your way forward while attacking. When you score a knockdown, the CPU tends to jump right when they get up. In this case, you should back off in advance so that you can anti-air them if they jump forward, though you can also reset back to neutral instead. I stick to this strategy no matter who I was using, but I found it much easier as characters like Zygrunt, Rotundo, and Uppercut. There's not much else I can say about the CPU due to their random nature and how similar the characters are. I did write all of my notes on my experience getting through the game as each character, so you can always check the guide below for the specifics. Instead, let's get straight into the final boss. Yeah, this guy is cheap. Valgasu is without a doubt the most overpowered character in the game. High jump height, huge health bar, good range on his ground and air attacks, and he's completely immune to potential infinite loops. This means that no matter which character you pick, there is no shortcut in defeating this monster. To top it off, he has one of the most dangerous grabs in the game. Not only is the damage ludicrously high, but he'll still be close to you after it ends. And being that this is the CPU we're talking about, that means he can force you in a neutral state grapple and instantly perform it again if he feels like it. Even if he got up to this point without using a continue, you can lose all of them in this fight alone. I lost count on how many times I got game over by this guy when I first played this. So is there a trick to defeat him? Well, he does have one flaw. Almost every time you knock him down, he'll jump back immediately upon getting up. Thanks to the wall bounce that happens from jumping back into a wall, you can use this to your advantage by creating some distance and hitting him out of the air when he bounces forward. If you don't have a good anti-air on the ground, you can instead meet him in the air with a jump attack. But keep in mind that some characters might have to depend on the different grab for optimal damage. For example, Zygrunt's C grab isn't as effective since Valgasu is immune to infinite loops. Therefore, you're better off using his B grab since it will deal more damage if Valgasu is drawn to the wall. And that's about all I can say about this fight. It'll be very unforgiving if it's your first time. Even if you know how to fight him, you can still get unlucky and lose within seconds. But with enough patience and a bit of luck, it can be done. The arena is silent. The contest is over. The battlegrounds lie empty and one warrior stands alone, victorious. The galaxy is in chaos, waiting its imminent devastation. True to their word, the primaries call upon forces to take your people away to safety. All that's left of your world is a fading white glare in the distance. Your civilization has been insured for another generation, while others have perished in the galactic destruction wrought by the nova of the Red Sun. All is quiet now, but how long will it remain so? And yeah, that's Fighting Masters. The ending is fine and all, but it's unfortunate that it's the same no matter which character you pick. On the bright side, you do get a pretty cool credit sequence, and the game will even show the difficulty you finished the game on. But that's all this game has to offer. There isn't much of a reason to finish it again, and I wouldn't consider the CPU very fun to fight against. So with everything covered, what do I think of Fighting Masters?
The game sounds cool on paper, and you go to play it and it's just not. The hit detection is terrible, the computer AI is ridiculously overpowered, there's no strategy at all. Actually, no, scratch that. There is a strategy.
It's average. I mean, what else do you expect me to say? It may have a ton of cool ideas and interesting aspects, but for every positive this game has, there's some kind of negative that holds it back. It doesn't help that many of the mechanics I explained aren't mentioned in the manual, so it's easy for a new player to assume that the game is some awful fighter with no depth at all. But again, I think the game is decent. It's an early fighting game that didn't have a lot of cartridge space to work with, but despite the limitations, the gameplay is still impressive for its time. It may not be amazing, but Fighting Masters is a good example on how looks aren't everything. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it, but if there's one thing we might agree on, is that Fighting Masters is an early example of dive kicks in the 90s. Thanks a bunch for watching this far. This is my second dedicated review so far, and I really want to do more of these. I plan to stick to reviewing games that I've put a ton of time into, so chances are that there will be games I've done a guide on. In any case, thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a good day. You're still here? Well, I guess I might as well mention one more thing. A few years ago, I used emulation to disable the invisibility frames during gameplay. It led to the game being ridiculously broken, but it was rather fun to mess around with. So if you want to do something like this... No! I can't move! Oh, okay! Oh, I swear! No! You can use this Game Genie code in order to disable the invincibility. In any case, that's pretty much all I have to say, and with that said, I'll see you later.